And every single week, I get to sit in a circle of men that I love and trust, and I get to say, brothers, I'm another fucking week into this adventure, and I haven't smoked cannabis. And I get their celebration and their praise and their cheer. And whenever the desire to smoke cannabis comes into my world, I think about having to sit in that circle next week and be like, actually, I didn't make it. And there's a part of me that's fucking not doing that because integrity is such an important part. But without the accountability, this would have been a very, very different adventure. In this episode, I'm going to share why taking a break from cannabis was one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life. What's up? It's Gareth. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. In this episode, I am going to be doing what I call a postgame, which is like the reflection of a specific period of my life. Today, it's been 169 days since I last engaged with cannabis. I spoke about this decision in episode number 51 of the podcast, which I will link up in the show notes or description of this episode for you to check out where I was at the beginning of this journey. But this postgame is really for me to reflect and share and answer some of the questions that I've received from people having listened to episode 51 of how's it going? What have you noticed? And yeah, I'm using this episode as much to share my journey as it is for my own personal reference to be able to take a breath and use this time to reflect on just how much has shifted in my life as a function of taking a break from cannabis. Before I dive into this episode, if you haven't listened to episode 51, I would suggest going back and having a look at that because I speak about some of my challenges that I had with cannabis, but just to give a short sort of thumbnail of what I believe about cannabis and what some of the reasons why I chose to consciously take a break from cannabis. And I want to start off by saying when I first launched episode number 51, quite a few people reached out and they were like, oh, cannabis has been so good for me. And, you know, if you don't have a problem with it, should you stop? And I'm like, I believe that the difference between poison and medicine is often the dose, meaning I think cannabis has got amazing applications in terms of it being able to be medicine when you use it consciously, when you use it in the right way, and when you use it in the right dose. My relationship with cannabis over the last few years, probably for most of my life, hasn't really been in the right format in terms of the right dose, meaning I wasn't using cannabis in moderation. I was using cannabis almost every single day. And when I wasn't using it, I was thinking about using it the next day. And so, yeah, I want to share that I think cannabis is really strong and powerful medicine when used in the right dose. I needed to get honest and clear with myself that the way that I was using it wasn't as medicine. It was like some coping strategy for me to prevent myself from feeling or from being with some heavy emotions or perhaps the challenges in the world or facing my internal grief or my own wounding. So that's just one of the things that I just want to say, that I don't say everybody who uses cannabis necessarily should take a break from it. I'm saying be aware where the dose has become like a dependency rather than an application that's really supporting you for whatever the reason is that the medicine is supporting you. The other thing I shared in episode 51, which I just want to bring back in here, is often the way that we use substances or medicine has a lot to do with what's called set and setting. Like, how do you set your intentions for using a specific medicine or a plant like cannabis, and where are you using it? You know, if you're just, and this was me, had a vape pen that you're just hitting every 5 minutes while you're out at the bar, while you're cooking dinner, I wasn't bringing a lot of presence and awareness to the set. How am I setting this? And then the setting was like, fuck, wherever I am, I'll just have some. So yeah, there's something about that as well, which for me was starting to come out of alignment. And I just want to bring that as almost like a caveat to speak into this episode, because yeah, there are people that can use alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, any of these types of medicines and plants very intentionally, and there is benefit in that. And I recognized that this wasn't the way that I was using cannabis, and that was the reason that I decided to take a break for at least a year. And 179 days in, is that almost half a year? Pretty close, if my math serves me correctly. 365? No, not quite. But I'm going to be breaking down my post game and my reflections into 4 areas. One of them is my time and output. Then I'm going to talk about my business. Then I'm going to talk about my clarity and my thinking. And then I'm going to be talking about my breakthrough the lens of my relationship. So make sure you stick around till the end, because I think how cannabis was affecting my relationship has probably been one of the most powerful areas where I've seen the most amount of benefit, and actually, on reflection, some of the most harm that was created by my relationship with cannabis. So let me start with time and output, and what I've noticed about my time and my ability to create as a function of having put down cannabis for the last 170 days. My ability to focus and be clear and to create has increased at a level that I don't think I was completely aware of, just how much energy I was wasting as a function of the conversations I was having with myself internally. And let me give you a practical example. There are certain things that I would not want to do when I had consumed cannabis. So, for example, recording a podcast like I'm doing now, if I'd had cannabis this morning, a part of me would be like, no, you're not sharp enough. If you go on camera, people are going to see that your eyes are blurry, or something, some story inside myself that would have prevented me from recording this podcast today. The topic would obviously have been different, but the sense was, if I wanted to do a podcast, there's often a place when I was using cannabis that I'd be like, okay, I'll do that podcast. I'll make a note and I'll do it tomorrow. But I couldn't do it now because I felt like the cannabis that I'd smoked earlier didn't give me the level of output that I wanted to be able to create this episode. And so there was very much a part of me that was taking tasks and pushing them to tomorrow as a function of the fact that I engaged with cannabis today. And those tasks are kind of significant in some ways. One of them would be like, phone my mom. I'm like, oh, fuck. No, I'm a bit stoned. I'll phone tomorrow. All these little things that I'm just pushing out is taking me out of my ability to be able to get things done in the present moment. And so my ability to be able to focus and to be able to create, like I just decided today, I'm like, let's do this post game, make some notes, get ready, turn on the camera and go. This wouldn't have been possible had I been in this phase of engaging with cannabis, because I would have had a story that I can only do it when I'm not stoned. And perhaps I had been stoned this morning because whatever my reasons had been for engaging with cannabis. So yeah, my time and my output has increased, I would say, maybe 5x. It's hard to measure exactly what it is, but just having the clarity of thought and the ability to be able to say, right, I'm ready to go now. There's nothing that I can't do without cannabis. That, let me say this differently. I can always do everything that I want to do in this state of mind, because there's nothing that's altered my state of mind. When I had cannabis in my world, there was always moments when it's like, okay, I can't do this right now, or I can't speak on a stage tonight because whatever those things are. There's definitely been an increase in my ability to be able to manage my time better, and as a result, my output and my productivity is significantly increased. If you see me looking down, I'm just keeping an eye on these notes so that I can keep this as on point as possible for you. And just going through my own process of reflecting on just how much has shifted in these last 169 days. Hey, it's Gareth. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. The original definition of courage means from the heart. And I believe that we can have more courage in our lives by speaking from the heart. I'm on a mission to help heal the world by cultivating more courage, by having more conversations like the one you're listening to now, where I encourage my guests to speak from the heart. If that's a mission that you want to get behind and are prepared to support me on, it would really help us if you would share this podcast with somebody that you think would benefit from listening to this conversation, or sharing it onto social media and encouraging your network of people to engage with our guest and the message that we're cultivating here at this podcast. It will also support us if you subscribe to the podcast or write a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And in exchange for your support, you have my word that I will continue to seek out the most exciting, courageous, and inspiring people on the planet to keep cultivating more courage and having more conversations like the one you're listening to now. Thanks for stopping by. And now back to the show. The next thing I want to talk about is my business. My business is in a completely different place now to where I was 169 days ago. And one of the things that I can point to in my engagements with cannabis was quite often I would feel maybe some of the anxiety of having to do something. I would come down here into my studio, I would have some cannabis, and then I would get all creative and I would make notes and do all of these things and feel like I was really in flow. But I was disconnected from actual reality, from real, raw reality, the part of me that actually needed to do the things that took everything from this notebook and made it into reality. I would spend loads of time journaling and have all these creative ideas, live in the fantasy. I even had, and I was very aware of this, I would be coaching or creating podcasts in my head that I would be talking about, but I never really got them out into the world. And so there was really this place of living in fantasy where I felt like my business was doing all the things, but I was bullshitting myself. I was living in this fantasy world about how I thought I was in the world, but it was all happening in my head. And if you don't engage with cannabis, this may not sound relevant to you, but there's definitely a place for me, where I lived in fantasy of, believing that everything was good and I was flowing and going because I had a notebook full of ideas, but none of them were actually going out into the world. And all this coaching, these amazing downloads that I had, I would make to-do lists and cards of content that I was going to create, but never really got down to it because tomorrow I'd be stoned again because I was using cannabis most days, just to recap just the level of my usage. And I'd be like, oh, I can't create that today, but I've got another 3 fucking amazing ideas. So my business has completely shifted because I still continue to get these amazing ideas, but now I turn the camera on and I create them, or I write the blog post, or I, move into the world. I make the introduction or make the connection in a way that I didn't used to do. So my business has shifted significantly. I have increased my revenue probably around 5x in the last 3 months. We're working on a funding deal as well. I've signed my single biggest one-on-one coaching client. What I ascribe that to is I recognize that in my relationship with cannabis, there was a part of me that felt out of my integrity. And the reason I say that is because I would say things to myself like, okay, it's Monday. I'm not going to smoke until Thursday. These would be like these internal negotiations that I would have with myself. And then somewhere around Tuesday, I'd be like, wow, fuck, it's been a rough day. Minter's not at home. And I just feel like getting stoned. And so I would then break the promise that I had made with myself. And I felt like it's an energy leak for me where my words don't match my actions, meaning my words were no smoking till Thursday. And suddenly Tuesday, I'm breaking those agreements with myself. These small little cracks in my internal integrity, I think, had filtered into my money game. And so how that would show up is like, first of all, maybe I wouldn't feel in my integrity to reach out to somebody. Or if I was on a coaching call with a potential client and it came time to ask for the money, I'd be like, does it feel worth it? Is this right for me? Like I would have this internal struggle around personal integrity that I think was as a function of not being in integrity in all of the things in my life. And so my business has shifted significantly. My relationship with money and the finances that have flowed into my business over the last few months, it's fucking night and day. And I spent probably the last few years doing money stuff, thinking about my money program. But the general integrity that I had with myself around cannabis, I think, was leaking in to my relationship of actually asking for sales, feeling in my power and in my integrity when I made offers. And so I really recognized that my financial situation and my business and the way that I'm able to show up for my team has shifted significantly as a function of the fact that I'm now feeling in my power, having reclaimed this energy from saying no to cannabis. So that's the second part. We spoke about time and output. We spoke about my business and finances, my thinking and my clarity. I think there's something for me in this. Well, let me say this differently. One of the things that I track in myself, and I think has been the most important part of my experience, is my meditation practice and how I can be the witness consciousness or the observer of my thoughts. Meaning the part of me that recognizes that something's happening in my head, that I'm telling stories, this internal voice, that the ego is continually making up stories about the world. My meditation practice gives me the ability to be able to see those stories and to recognize them and to release the ones that I don't want and not hold them as true, and to be able to anchor in the stories that I do want. So a story may sound like, oh, money is difficult to come by and I'm having a tough time this month with manifesting financial flow into my business. And then I look around and like, it's not actually true. I've got potential clients that I could call. I've got things that I could do to create some financial flow in my world. The awareness that I have of those thoughts and stories is really how I understand my ability to be able to track and create my own reality. I believe that the stories that I tell in my head become the words that come out of my mouth, which becomes the reality that I see in physical form around me. So if I want to change my reality, I change my stories. This is stuff we've spoken about before on the podcast. I'm sharing that because I think there is this place where we can leak energy, where what we're saying in our heads and the promises that we're making to ourselves and what we're actually doing in the world are mismatched. Like I'm going to get up this morning and go to the gym 5 times this week, and then I don't do it. The internal conversations that I was having with myself about cannabis, I recognize as an energy leak, because there's a part of me when I was engaging with cannabis that would wake up in the morning and be like, okay, I suddenly start a conversation in my day that starts like, okay, I'm going to work out this morning. I'll have some cannabis. Then will I be sober enough to record a podcast this afternoon? There's all this internal dialogue that's continually happening inside me when I had cannabis in my world as to when I'm going to have it. How's it going to affect the rest of my day? Is it okay? Is this too much? What was the agreement I made with myself? It doesn't maybe sound like a lot. It was so significant in my experience that this conversation was continually going on and on and on inside myself. There's 2 voices. One of them is probably my mother. You should never do drugs. It's a bad idea. The other voice is my rebel that's like, come on, let's just get stoned. It'll be fun. And these 2 parts are just fucking having an internal dialogue, and it's using up a huge amount of bandwidth in my experience. So I think since I've taken cannabis out of my life, those 2 voices are just gone. There's just this peaceful silence of, okay, I'm awake. Cool. I'm going to go move my body. I go upstairs. I exercise on the roof. I do what I need to do. I come down. My day's planned. I'm just moving through my day, but I've freed up all of that capacity and that energy that I was using to have this internal dialogue about when I could have cannabis and whether it was a good idea and how much can I have. And that's all just gone, and it's just faded away into the background. And so something about that has been hugely, hugely significant to be able to free up this energy. And now I can allocate that bandwidth, that mental sharpness, and that mental capacity to things that I genuinely want to call into my life. So that's been super, super huge for me. And it's kind of hard to articulate. You can't measure it, but I know that it's big, because that arguing voice inside my head has basically been gone for the last 170 days because I'm just not using cannabis right now. The next thing that came from this has been my clarity. I think I shared in episode 51 when I first spoke about this, probably since I was about 13, maybe I was 12. I can't remember the first time I smoked cannabis. I was early high school. Pretty much since then, it's been in my life most of the time. I'd be smoking on the weekends when I was in school. As I got older, there were times when it was in and out of my life. But for most of the time, I don't think I've ever gone, I would take breaks for a month. This is how I was, and I spoke about this in the previous episode. I'd be like, right, I'm smoking a lot. I'm going to take a break for a month so that I can prove to myself that I don't. So I'd like muscle through a month. At the end of that month, I'd be like, oh, cool, I can do it. I would start with cannabis again. And after a couple of weeks, I'd be back into the same cycle of smoking every single day. That would happen for 6 or 7 months. I would take a month break. That's to say that over the last 32 years, while I've been smoking, I don't think I've ever had 100 consecutive days where I haven't had cannabis in my world. From what I understand, it takes almost 100 days for cannabis to completely leave your system. So I don't think I ever understood or really had a reference point for what it felt like to completely have cannabis be out of my system. What I noticed and what I feel now is, even when I took a break from cannabis, there was this general sort of haze or fog that existed in my experience that felt like I couldn't quite access clarity. Like there was a level of clarity or a level of what was coming through me that I wanted to say that I couldn't quite grasp. It was like it was on the other side of the mist. It's kind of hard to describe, but I would be like just a 1 or 2 steps behind my thinking somehow. And I made it work for most of my life, but I don't think I completely realized it until over these last couple of months. It's been completely out of my system. And now I feel my words and my thinking coming through in a way that they're much more congruent. There's that fog that was between my thinking and my words. That's probably a better way to describe it. My thinking and my words had a thin layer of fog between it. That's how it felt. That fog's completely gone. I think about something, it comes out clearly. I don't find myself scratching for words or having to look for things in the way that I used to when I had cannabis in my life. And this would even be on the days that I'd be sober, meaning I smoked yesterday. this morning at 10 o'clock, I've got a Zoom call with my tribe, or I'm teaching something, or I'm recording a podcast. As I'm doing this, I'm like, part of me is like just trying to grab the words through this fog. And I made it work, but that fog's gone. And there's something that feels really, really sharp in my ability to be able to access what's coming through, thoughts, transmissions, thinking, and the actual words coming out of my mouth. That feels like it's been so significant. And I don't think I really realized this until I had the chance to let this cannabis completely move through my system. So yeah, time and output hugely upgraded. My business has shifted completely, and my clarity in my thinking has been huge. And I think I want to perhaps wrap up this post game by sharing how I see the role of cannabis supporting my relationship now. Me and my beloved Araminta have been in a relationship now for 6 years. It's the longest relationship that either of us have had in terms of duration in our lives. And so it's been significantly transformative. It's been super powerful for me. I know it's been amazingly powerful for her as well. And probably over the last 18 months, we've got into like a slightly different rhythm of our relationship. She's been in a perimenopause portal and is going through a strong body initiation that's really shaken her in so many ways. Like she's finding herself disconnected from her body. She's feeling a very low erotic charge in her body. That's been affecting me. I've been in this place of like wanting to give her space, but also I had fallen back into some of my patterns of people pleasing, of like, wanting to make sure that everybody else is okay. So I bring that as context to share that as this challenge in our relationship started to unfold, I believe I was using cannabis as a way to just fucking get a break from that stuff. Like this was too difficult. I also shared in episode 51 that the spirit of cannabis is feminine. It's a feminine plant. And I feel like I was having a deep love affair with cannabis because I felt like I was not being met in my personal relationship with Araminta. And so while that isn't inherently bad, I think what was becoming challenging, and I'm taking my responsibility for this, and I've spoken to Araminta about this, was there was a part of me that felt a lot of guilt and shame about how much cannabis I was using. And so what that would look like is like, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm feeling uneasy about the world. My relationship was definitely part of it. And I felt her in a difficult place, and I felt like I was doing what I needed to do. But then there's a part of me that wanted to escape. And so I would come down to the studio, I would have some cannabis, and it would be this like, oh God. It felt like falling into the arms of a delicious woman. And I just got the opportunity to completely surrender and relax and just to be for a while. And then let's say that's 3:00 in the afternoon. At 5:30, we decide to have dinner together. We eat dinner together most nights. I would feel some guilt and shame about how much cannabis I had. So I wouldn't tell her. But I would move into the kitchen or into her field, but not say, hey, I had some cannabis this afternoon, not in my power, just like a little bit shadowy, feeling a bit uneasy with it. And so this fog that I explained in my thinking, I also feel started to create this layer of disconnection between me and the woman that I love so much. And I'm now understanding that as energetic beings, you're in a relationship with the people around you, and we can feel one another long before the words actually come out of our mouths that describe our reality. And so I would go into the kitchen and she would feel me, maybe feeling uneasy, maybe feeling a bit sad, maybe feeling whatever I was feeling. But then my words, I wouldn't bring that in, or I definitely wouldn't tell her that I had been smoking. And I feel like this was just like a gradual, like, I don't know, death by 1,000 paper cuts, where day after day I would just be showing up at a different frequency to her, not bringing what was genuinely alive and hiding some of my shame that I felt around the cannabis that I was using. And I think it started to really destroy our relationship. And probably towards the end of last year, our relationship started to hit up against some big stuff. And we had a lot of stuff start to explode, and we had a lot of stuff start to move in our connection. And we've been holding space for ourselves and for one another to come back into alignment with our connection. And part of the transformational relationship is the strong mirror that this connection has become for me to be able to see my own stuff. And as this starts to explode and feel uncomfortable and we trigger one another, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, what's my responsibility to take here? Because the ego is like, it's all her fault. She's the one going through menopause. Fuck, it must be her. And then I'm like, well, hold on a second, dude. You're playing a role here, that you're in a dance with this relationship, and I'm manifesting my reality in every single moment, and I'm playing a role in this relationship. What's mine to look at? Fuck, it was so clear that I'm basically having a love affair with a plant, that every single day I'm just like, oh, I can't be bothered with the difficulties of my current relationship. So instead of just saying, hey, I'm finding this really hard, and being honest and just showing up and just continually being there and being honest, even when it looks messy, I just check out, have some cannabis, makes me feel cool. I go into the kitchen. I'm like, hey, what's up? How was your day? Super rad. She can feel underneath that something's up. She doesn't quite know what it is, but she just gets the sense that she doesn't quite feel me. And I'm in the process of making sure that I do the repair work in my relationship for the damage that I caused by not being able to be completely honest with my partner. That's the fucking bottom line of this. And again, I don't think that there's anything wrong with doing cannabis, even when you're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't smoke cannabis. I think that's fucking perfectly fine. And actually, at the moment, it's so weird. Araminta has got cannabis in her life right now. She didn't smoke that much while I was smoking, and she's in a stage now where she has some cannabis a couple times a week. And it feels fine, but she's in her power with it. She's not trying to hide it away from me. She just says, oh, I'm going to smoke tonight. And I'm like, I'm not smoking with her because of this adventure that I'm on. But there's something for me in bringing the authenticity. And I think that there's something that was definitely degrading and continually just breaking down the trust in our relationship one day at a time. And yeah, I'm committed to this relationship and I'm really committed to making it work. And there was definitely something in how the cannabis was being used as a way to mask and create this maybe haze and disconnection between us that I think gradually over time definitely led to some of the challenge that we're working through right now. So that's it. That's a wrap of my 169 days without cannabis. Where to from here? I would say that there's one of the things that has been the most significant for me in sticking to this promise of not doing cannabis for an entire year. And that's the accountability that I have from my men's group. If you're out there listening to this and you're battling with any sort of addiction, whether it's cannabis or social media or alcohol or pornography or whatever that is, and you make the decision to take a break from it for a while, fucking go for it. Good on you. I celebrate you. And just recognize that it's fucking difficult. That old part of you that just wants to cop out and go back into the safety of the cannabis or the deliciousness of pornography or whatever it is that's your vice or your addiction, it's hard to do. It's hard to step away from that. And there's always a strong resistance that's going to pull you back to the known, the part of you that feels safe or comfortable or that uses a substance or an addiction to discharge energy or relax. And it's much easier to make sure that you show up for a 5 o'clock run every single day when you've got a running buddy. Because when you have to be accountable to somebody, you're much more likely to show up than you are if you're only accountable to yourself. If I don't have a running buddy, I very often just turn the alarm on to snooze and don't get out there. And so my men's group, the Fathers, Sons, Brothers tribe, and the men that I love and trust in my life that are holding me to the best version of myself through my own commitments and my own decisions to show up as the best version of myself have been a really important part. And every single week I get to sit in a circle of men that I love and trust. And I get to say, brothers, I'm another fucking week into this adventure and I haven't smoked cannabis. And I get their celebration and their praise and their cheer. And whenever the desire to smoke cannabis comes into my world, I think about having to sit in that circle next week and be like, actually, I didn't make it. And there's a part of me that's fucking not doing that because integrity is such an important part. But without the accountability, this would have been a very, very different adventure. So below this video, I'm going to leave a link to the King's Circle. This is our monthly men's circle that is a place for you to be able to drop in and check in with a global tribe of growth-minded men. These are dudes just like you that have got relationships and challenges and wins and success stories and success and failure and heartbreak that are all part of the human condition. And we come together and speak authentically and hold a space to be able to explore topics like addiction, like challenging relationships, like leadership, and a host of other topics at the last Sunday of every single month. If you've never been to a King Circle before and you're looking for a safe space to be held accountable, to be able to show up as what we call an integrated leader, meaning you recognizing that there's parts of yourself. I spoke about my two parts, my mother and my rebel, earlier on in this episode. We all have these different voices. The integrated leader is recognizing all of them and showing up in your full power and in your integrity so that you can move into the world feeling aligned and on mission. So if you haven't been to a King Circle before, or even if you have, come to another one. The details are in the show notes below. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody who may be dancing with addiction. It really supports the show for us to be able to get this message and to share some of the lessons and learnings that we're going through and we're using inside the tribe, and these sorts of experiments of letting go of addictions and these lifestyle design experiments with others. So if this has supported you and you think it would support somebody else, please share it with them, and I'll see you on the next episode. Ciao.